Hello all, welcome to the show. I'm Gus Gagliardi and this is Fire Code Tech. On Fire Code Tech, we interview fire protection professionals from all different careers and backgrounds in order to provide insight and a resource for those in the field. My goal is to help you become a more informed fire protection professional. Fire Code Tech has interviews with engineers and researchers, fire marshals, and insurance professionals, and highlights topics like codes and standards, engineering systems, professional development, and trending topics in the industry. So if you're someone who wants to know more about fire protection or the fascinating stories of those who are in the field, you're in the right place. Hello all, welcome to episode 27 of Fire Code Tech. On this episode, we have Craig Vesely. Craig is a fire protection engineer who got his start in fire suppression contracting. We speak about his transition to his role as a fire protection engineer and then to head of a department and now to being a fire protection engineer for a utility company. In this episode, we talk about Craig's journey from his career and also we get into what he's doing now, starting his own consulting practice as a fire protection engineer, while he also keeps his day job as a owner representative and fire protection staff engineer. Craig also serves on the NFPA technical committees for NFPA 20 and NFPA 24. We touch on these briefly during the professional development segment. Also, in this episode, we talk about some really fascinating and niche design topics such as combustible dust and aircraft maintenance hangar fire protection. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I had a great time with Craig and talked about some really interesting stuff. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Let's dive into the show. Well, Craig, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Gus. It's a pleasure to be here. Glad I can get a chance to speak with you.
Awesome. So I always like to get started with, letting the listeners know a little bit about your background and how you got into the industry. Seems like everybody has a different path. Would you mind telling us about that?
Sure, I'd love to. Uh, my path is probably a bit different than most. I did not go to school knowing that I wanted to be a fire protection engineer. Following graduation, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, and after that, I moved to Madison, Wisconsin. And in doing so, honestly, I was just starting the basic job search like you would for any type of entry level job. So I found a posting with Ahern Fire Protection. They're a large regional fire protection contractor sprinkled through the Midwest, and they had an ad looking for individuals who were able to use AutoCAD. So I took it up and sent my resume in, interviewed, and was given my first position in the fire protection industry designing sprinkler systems.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, it's so funny that we both have a mutual background at Ahern. I imagine, yeah, it was funny we were talking about it previously. It's so interesting how good of a job market fire suppression has and just the ability to get a foot into the industry. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it was one of those jobs. I always envisioned myself working designing cars or designing motorcycles or something like that. And once I got into the position, I thought it would be just stepping stone. I'm going to keep moving on, and I absolutely fell in love with the industry. One of the big things I noticed is there's so many opportunities that are out there, and having that understanding of working as a contractor and getting into the sprinkler systems, I'm like, it is such a stepping stone to other things and that you can do, so many different paths, and such a need for qualified and individuals that can go out and really make an impact. So I was blown away. I was totally caught off guard and by surprise. And this is now, boy, what is it, about 18 years later. And each day I still find myself just as excited and invigorated with the industry we get to work in.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's kind of dumbfounding how much opportunity there is specifically in fire suppression. It seems like there is a constant need for designers and people to get in on the ground floor on fire suppression and fire protection in general. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I definitely, I have yet to meet any fire protection contractors out there that don't seem to have a an opening for a new designer. It seems like there's always a door open when you need somebody there. It's can't get enough good people into our industry to fill these positions.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, that's an awesome point, Craig. I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into some of the other roles you've held in your career in fire and life safety. Yeah, would you mind telling us about your path after Ahern and some of the other different roles that you've been involved with?
Sure, absolutely. So when I was at Ahern, I'd say the first 6 months or so of my career, I was spent working in designing sprinkler systems, fire pump systems, and about that time, there was an opportunity within Ahern that they moved me to an estimator position. So then I spent the next 6 months of my career as an estimator, really learning how do we produce bids, how do we price change orders, what are some of the ins and outs of the labor market, material escalation? How does that work? And so I was worked as an estimator. Roughly 6 months was the training that they had identified for me, and at that point, then I was moved to a project manager role and spent 4 years or so working as a project manager. Really out there building relationships, putting together bids, managing the work. And it had taken me, just a bit out of the doing some of the design work on the computer and providing some of that oversight to the project, but then really, helping to guide these things from conception through completion. In 2008, right around the height of the financial crisis, and despite some of my parents' best warnings at the time to just stay put, I accepted a new position. I went to work for Affiliated Engineers Incorporated in Madison, AEI. AEI is a consulting firm. There's 19 offices, and they're sprinkled mostly around the United States with, I believe, a couple globally as well. And being headquartered in Madison, I accepted a position as an engineer there and began leading engineering work for fire protection systems. And it was really across a host of different markets. I remember we did a lot of work in science and technology, healthcare, process industry, aviation and aerospace, and quite a bit in the federal market as well, including projects with both the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. Approximately, I'd say 3 years or so into my time at AEI, I was then promoted to department facilitator. So I was then challenged with overseeing fire protection for the entire firm. I had a small team of engineers that were working under me, as well as one or two other individuals sprinkled throughout other offices. And so, it was a real turning point for me in the career where, for the initial stages, there was always somebody you could go to, somebody else that if I had a question, I'm like, I can get them to consult. Then, they can help me guide me through this. And it was that moment where I was thrust to the front of the line, and it was, now that falls on your shoulders. You're going to be the one who has to make that determination, that decision, and offer that insight. So, I think many of us, as you kind of go through your careers, experience that where you all of a sudden go from the person asking the questions to the person that everybody turns to and says, what do we do now? And so that really kind of forced me to advance my own knowledge, my own understanding. We'll get to my PE route as I got there, but it forced me to just continue to develop my own career and my own capabilities to be able to answer those. So that was really kind of as I worked those first few roles and went through the process of kind of advancing up the ladder.
Yeah, I like that. I'd like to, touch on that a little bit more about how that's an interesting transition to go from, fire suppression contracting to more a fire protection engineering role.
Sure.
Yeah, what did you think of that? What did you think of that transition at the time, going from the nuts and the bolts? And oh yeah, I wanted to say also, you must have been pretty good at picking up the design stuff if you moved from being an entry level designer to an estimator in 6 months. That's a pretty quick move, I feel like, for somebody to pick that up.
To be honest, Gus, I think it was my CAD skills at the time. I think they looked at me and said, "This guy just cannot cut it drawing for us. It's taken him too long." But he seems to have a bit of a knack for what we're trying to do. What else can we do with him to not have to fire him? So I think it was more mercy on the management, my boss Ken at the time, of just not wanting to cut me loose altogether and trying to find a better way for me to fit within the organization.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, it's estimating is fast and furious too. Though it seems like if a designer gets 40 hours to work on something, the estimator only gets like 2 or 4 hours to take a look at a job and evaluate it and bid it. So yeah, that's no easy task. I think you might be selling yourself short here.
I think what it helped though is as you look as my career advanced into the engineering world, part of that is being able to look at something quickly and to be able to reach a decision. I'd like to say that all of us get all of the information and it's well documented and we have no issues. But it seems like in the truth and the reality of the world is that there's always some kind of missing piece. And so you're going to have to be able to evaluate the knowledge the information you have on hand and use the knowledge that you've built to come to the decision you make at that time. So I really felt like that kind of forced my hand to learn. Like you're not going to get every single piece that you would like. You're going to have to fill in the blanks a bit and fill in the gaps to get to what you need. So it was definitely an educational experience to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. I resonate with that sentiment that you have to be able to extrapolate, from the information and the stakeholders at hand. And you're never going to most things are not just cut and dry. Or if they do, you don't spend very much time on them if they're black and white. So you spend most of your time in the weeds on the gray. So yeah, I
Exactly. It's
definitely resonate with that
so
sentiment.
many of us would love, I think as engineers, we love black and white, but unfortunately, it seems like we spend most of our career and time muddling through the gray trying to find the way out.
Yeah, I think if it's clear in the code, we're the first one to say, "Oh, I give the people around me at where I work trouble." Just we I say that's code probably several times a week, just because if it's black and white, then that's the easiest thing for us. We can just snip, get a little computer snip of the code excerpt, and move on our merry way. But it's most of the time where you're like today. I was taking a look at like exhaust hoods for commercial cooking appliances and when it's considered commercial versus residential. And so I'm searching through the back of the International Mechanical Code, reading annex material for this subject, and it's like, god, reading forums from '07, trying to see what other people have said about this subject. And so I think that's just a metaphor for the profession, but long-winded
Definitely,
way to say
definitely.
that.
I couldn't agree more, Gus.
So moving on to after, well, I did want to touch on a little bit more of that like transition from engineering to contracting, or contracting to engineering, if you will, and kind of the mindset change. And yeah, I don't know if you had any more thoughts on that transition, or it sounded like you obviously, took to it and moved up into a manager, and then kind of a branch lead, if you will. So yeah, I don't know. I find that fascinating because I think there's several experience and just kind of career jumps in that little piece.
Yeah, it was for anybody that's been to Madison, where I live. What you'll find is that a vast majority of what you see here is 4-story buildings. We have some mixed use residential that's kind of taken off, some small warehouses. There's some manufacturing, some process work, but it's not a home that you would say, oh, that's really the focus of the area. So for me, after spending that time at Ahern, managing work and chasing bids and doing that, I just realized that I'm like, there's so much more I want to do with my career. I could spend the next 25 years selling systems for these different buildings and different clients, but I just felt like I wanted a bigger challenge. And so when the opportunity came up, I said, hey, I can take what I've learned here as the basis of my knowledge, and now let's expand that. it's a double-edged sword. It was a blessing and a curse. There's plenty of days I will tell you as the consulting engineer that I'm like, this is fantastic. I really enjoy it. And then there's also plenty of days where you're like, this is really challenging. We're under deadlines to have design documents printed and ready to go. And you're still looking, as you said, through annex material, solving some of these issues and things that may not seem to be directly, is it a sprinkler system or is that a rated wall? I'm like, some of those things seem very, fall within our type of work and what we're comfortable with. What I found that was most challenging is there's a lot of other things that had come up, as far as, different fire stopping solutions or egress and parts and pieces that I hadn't had a great deal of experience in dealing with. And so it really started to, push my boundaries and forced me to continue to grow. I'm a huge continuing education advocate. Go out there and attend webinars and, things that may seem like it's a fringe item for you, but it's fascinating to me how much someone can learn. And then you find ways to apply that in new ways that we use within our own engineering work. So just being a continual learner, it was a key piece of my advice to anyone that would look to make that transition as well. It is much more enjoyable. I really, really like being on the front end, working with clients and architects to develop a building. What is it going to look like, and then how can we make it function, and take that functional aspect of it, and then make it fit within the codes and the parameters that we have to. That's where to me the most exciting challenge lies. So I really wanted to expand, and I definitely got what I was asking for and more.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really like that explanation. That's a great synopsis of, what it means to be a fire protection engineer. I like that bit of exposition. But I wanted to move forward with the discussion and, kind of talk about what you're doing now and give the people an idea of where you're at today and some of the work you're involved in and how that's continued to kind of color your perspective on fire and life safety.
Sure. So I had spent approximately 11 years working for AEI. Back in I'd say late 2018, early 2019, a friend at the gym came up one day and suggested that I apply for the current role I have, or one of the current roles I have, as a fire protection program manager with Alliant Energy. Alliant Energy we're an electric and natural gas utility with service territories stretching across Iowa and Wisconsin. And so they were looking for someone. They had a gentleman who was nearing retirement, and they wanted to find someone to come in and lead their fire protection program. One of the things that I guess was most intriguing to me about the position was, I'm like, it's really a team of one, and you're responsible for overseeing any fire and life safety related issues. When I interviewed the gentleman that I was replacing, he's like, best describe this as you're going to have to be our in-house subject matter expert. And so one of the things that I had taken a real passion and interest in was combustible dust. While working at AEI, we had several projects with small combustible dust components that I found to be really challenging and really interesting. I think a lot of the science behind combustible dust continues to evolve, and some of the work that the scholars are doing to understand how does dust react and how can we handle that is fascinating. So the more I read and the more I dove into the issue, the more I realized that by making a transition and moving over to Alliant Energy, I would have the opportunity to work with combustible dust. Some of our older power plants are coal based, so dealing with coal dust on a daily basis and having to understand some of the safety and the measures that we take to prevent accidents from happening was that opportunity. So I jumped at it. I made that change. Fast forward about another year, just last fall, I realized that my passion really lies still with helping and educating people. And despite serving as that fire protection person during the day, I really was longing to continue my work as a consulting engineer. I really enjoyed the client-based projects. I liked working with architects, finding ways to solve some of their new innovative ideas and come up with the solutions. And so I wanted to take what I had learned at Ahern and at AEI and at Alliant Energy, and I've also opened up my own consulting engineering firm. I really have long believed that there was a market that I could capture within the region around my home. It's not a hotbed near some of the main schools that have fire protection engineers, and so oftentimes when you see a job opening in this area, you realize that I'm like, there's just not that many here, and I kept looking at it. And I'm still convinced, and as I'm working on building my own firm here, that there is this opportunity within this region for me to be successful. So I wanted to take that step out on my own, and be able to continue to share what I've learned and help to educate others on what some of the fire protection challenges and solutions are.
Wow, that's really exciting. Yeah, I'm super, interested to hear about that journey and, taking that leap. I mean, you've already had not that your career is over, but you've already had such a storied career so far, and, the projects that you've worked on and the pieces of the industry that you've seen. But yeah, I think now is a natural time to talk to you about kind of what you're doing at your starting your own practice now and how that journey has been kind of taking those first steps to starting your own firm. I'm fascinated in this subject. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's been a wealth of information and things that I've learned, the experience, and it goes all the way from coming up with a logo, developing a website, to hey, I need to invoice somebody, and wait, I don't have an invoice. Before it was simple. We have one. It's stored on the file. Just print this and send it off, and all of a sudden, when it all falls back on you, you're now jumping into Microsoft Word and you're searching in their templates to go, wow, I need an invoice. What can I create here? So, it really provides you with the full gamut of experience from, seeking out, getting your own hardware, your own software, to finding, the professional insurance that you need to maintain, to setting up bank accounts. I mean, it really is the um, ultimate in a crash course tutorial on this is how it works. So it's been a unique challenge. Uh, I'm sure that in many instances it may have been easier on myself if I would have just chosen to cut the cord, get drop the parachute, and just jump into this head first. Maybe that would have provided me with more time. Obviously, I've got my full time commitment to Alliant Energy that I have throughout the day, and so it's become a lot of evenings, late nights, working around. I have two younger kids, working around their schedules and games and such. And then you throw in the ongoing pandemic, and trying to meet and talk with people is obviously changed so greatly in the last year. So, you know, it's been a never ending challenge, but I guess in my case, I look at it as an opportunity. Whether it is successful or unsuccessful, the things that I have learned in doing this are going to benefit me and my ability to be successful in the rest of my career. So I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I just felt like it was the time to do it. You look at the career I've had up to this point, and a lot of it I said was spent, gaining that knowledge, gaining the understanding, the confidence, and the ability to do that. And you give it a consideration as you move through, and it becomes a timing thing. And for me, it was realizing I'm like, at this point I finally felt like I've got enough experience, I've got enough contacts, I've got enough business acumen that I've been able to accrue in doing work with others and for others in all these kind of different areas where my career has gone. And so it was like, you know what, this is the time I want to capitalize and say, I feel like I've got enough now where I'm going to be comfortable making that step.
Wow, there's a lot of great stuff there. Yeah, I really appreciate that bit of explanation on, kind of the journey and the extra work involved. I definitely know what you're talking about. With the nights and weekends thing, as this podcast has been a labor of love for me as well, and just making time to, whether it's in the early nights or mornings, make time to get things done. That's something that I know about for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm just fascinated. You've been at your role now, and I know that you had quite a bit of time as somebody who probably was involved with business development and kind of the acquisition of projects. But yeah, I mean, like getting into your own practice, is this something that you just understand, like how the project acquisition function works, and you can just kind of like just the first customers, and like how does that work? Is that from like existing connections? I don't know. It's just from somebody who doesn't have any background in like the BD side of it. I'm just like, I don't even know what the first step would even be. And I've read some different forums and stuff online, and I don't know. There's not always like there's no book on how to get your first customer in fire protection engineering. So yeah, I mean, have an awesome career for a decade and a half, and then maybe you'll have the connections and be able to talk to people and kind of have that business acumen you mentioned before. But yeah, that's something I'm fascinated about.
It is. It's really, it's a mix. I've found success. Part of it, I think, just becomes you have to instantly put on your marketing cap. I didn't take any marketing classes. I wish I would have, looking back now and seeing where I'm at. But, building an online brand, anything from, helping. My wife was instrumental. We created a website, and there was a service we used to develop a logo, and some of those initial steps, just getting a footprint out there for someone to go and be able to find you, getting it so that you can Google search Vesely Fire and you can find that I've got a website, and putting information up there so that people can find you. I've had people reach out and contacts and develop customers from just having that online presence. Finding ways to leverage social media. I think we see a lot of these content creators and such, and it really is something that I think you have to put to work. Now, I never thought that having a LinkedIn business page or putting it on my own personal and sharing things that I'm doing would have that impact, but it really did. It expanded that network and my connections to understand the opportunity that they have here, that I can work with them. I have this going, and so it's getting the word out. So it's using the media, it's the marketing aspect, and then it's the old fashioned connections. As people have seen the posts or have talked to me, and they begin to understand, like, oh, this is a service, and really, it's building on your network. So that's one of the things, I always say, I'm like, meet people. You go to a conference and like talk to somebody, exchange business cards. And it's kind of crazy the number of times that's worked out, where then I've had somebody reach out and say, hey, can you help me with something like this? And all of a sudden, you're putting together a proposal for some work that was just naturally came up in conversation when people learn that you work in fire protection. So it's really helping to just try and become your own advocate, and really stretching out to try and get those to understand this is what you're working on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's very interesting. Um, since you have such a interesting career and background with fire protection engineering, I wanted to pick your brain on a couple of specific topics in regard to design, because anytime I get a chance to speak with somebody with a design niche within the niche itself of fire protection, I love to just kind of explore these topics. Um, so yeah, I mean, the one you mentioned previously, which I didn't even expect to talk about, but I'm a huge fan of, is combustible dust. I mean, that's such a nuanced and difficult subject in fire protection engineering. I feel like people get out of their depths pretty fast when it comes to combustible dust and the codes and standards associated with the reports on the explosibility of the dust. And I think it's a very complex and nuanced topic. So yeah, maybe since you were saying that you have interest in that subject, I'd love to hear more from you about that.
That's been one of the things. You highlighted some of the issues, and one of the reasons I was drawn to it, as I said, it's really. I mean, I consider fire protection. We're in a niche field here. There's not like an expansive number of us like you may see from mechanical engineers or electrical engineers, and then you delve into this and you look, and people working in the combustible dust market are probably even a much smaller segment of the fire protection industry, and so I was intrigued. Several folks that I had met over the years, the thing I found is that many of them had been doing it for many, many years, and the amount of information they had was astounding. But many of them were looking to retire either up until now or in the next several years. I think you're going to see a real turnover in some of the engineers that are working in the combustible dust market. So I was intrigued. I thought, here's another opportunity. Whether I guess whether it's right or wrong, Richard Branson, I think I sometimes try to model after, in that I just jump in and say, let's do it and let's figure it out. And he has got some quotes to that effect, and so that's really what I did. The beautiful part was I got a crash course that I don't think many others would be offered. When I came to Align Energy, there was the gentleman that I was going to be taking over for upon his retirement. I had a 6 to 9 month window at the beginning of my time there where I got to work with him. And so having somebody that I could go walk through the process and, conduct a dust hazard analysis and understand some of the testing requirements and the calculations that we use to determine explosibility. How do we protect items? I had firsthand opportunity to go to plants and areas that have dust and really look at what is the dust mitigation strategies that they've employed. Where are the areas that we need to be concerned? Diving into the class 2 electrical classifications, and what is it required for some of the equipment that we use in there. And by having that opportunity, I would give the guy that I was learning from grief. I said, "You're like the godfather of dust to me. Like, you just know the things that he had forgotten. Is what I hope to learn someday." So, for me, it was that finding this opportunity within that market. Looking elsewhere, I would think it would be a monumental undertaking for somebody to just say, "I want to work in that," without having some experience. There's many, many good engineers that deal with this, and scholars that are obviously far more educated and advanced in their understanding of it than me. And if you can find a way to work with those individuals to start to glean the knowledge that they have and the understanding, just to build up your own capabilities, is a phenomenal opportunity. So it was something I was interested in, and I feel like when you pique your interest in something, you'll find a way to get that. And so in this case, the opportunity came up, and I was able to get some firsthand experience working in this market.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I've had some really small scale projects that dealt with combustible dust and the complexities involved. And so really just dipped my toe into those waters. But it doesn't take you very long to realize that they are super deep, and that, yeah, you really want to have it's like basically hazardous materials. You don't want somebody who is a dilettante in hazardous materials or combustible dust if you are developing a project with a decent amount of size and complexity with these items, because they're just so niche and nuanced. So yeah, I like that.
Gus, I think the other part of this is that also having a network. All of my years of attending conferences and webinars and such, and meeting some of these people throughout our industry, having built relationships with some of them and having the ability to call somebody up and say, "I'm working on something like this. What are your thoughts? What is your perspective on it? Being a one-man show at Alliant Energy, I don't have another engineer here necessarily that I can always bounce an idea off of. And so having, building up a network, I challenge anybody listening to this to reach out, talk to people, meet people, go grab a coffee with them and discuss these things when you have a chance, because I've been paid back tenfold for the effort that I've put into my networking by having the ability to talk with these individuals that are, the leading, front runners in that type of market. So I would say if you get the chance, don't sit there. It's easy to sit in a conference and take some notes and keep to yourself, but challenge yourself really, especially as engineers. Let's push ourselves outside of our often introverted preference here and build up a network so you have someone to turn to for some help.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's such a powerful thing to be able to network and speak with somebody who's made this their life's work and their passion. And, people want to talk to you about this stuff, or at least that's the way I think about it. Somebody comes to me with a question about an area in which I have expertise. I chomp at the bit to be able to help somebody out. So I think that's a great point, Craig. I really appreciate that sentiment and the challenge to those who are listening to, expand your horizons. That's something I'm all about. But speaking of niche topics, I recognize from taking a look at your LinkedIn profile that you had some experience in another area in which I think is a super fascinating topic and exceedingly niche, which is fire suppression and just generally fire protection services for aircraft maintenance hangars. I'd love to kick that topic around with you and talk about some of those unique design challenges.
Yeah, you bet. Probably the most notable experience I had was in designing an aircraft maintenance hangar for AAR Corp. They have a new facility, I guess a couple years old now, down at the Chicago Rockford International Airport in Rockford, Illinois. In that case, the facility was a membrane covered steel frame structure. So it was a Group 4 aircraft hangar. Um, the project itself included 2 hangars. They were roughly 10 stories tall and I believe around 90,000 square feet each. And they were designed to fit either the Boeing 747 or the Airbus A380 aircraft. So the need for the client was constructing a hangar that was large enough that they could get those aircraft to fit within. The 2 hangars were situated so they were side by side with a kind of a T-shaped office and maintenance area in between those. And so the challenge was, how do we provide fire protection for both hangars, the associated office space there? So things that we learned, that project ended up using 2 diesel engine driven fire pumps. They were 3,000 GPM each, and both hangar bays had 15 of the high expansion foam generators. For that project, we used the Ansel Jet X 27 generators. The largest one, I believe at the time, maybe, unless they've come out with something since, might be the largest they still have for the high expansion foam generator. One of the big challenges that we came up with on the project was with this steel structure, if you envision it's basically a structure, and then, there's spacing between. So you've got basically these giant, we'll call them U-shaped or rainbow-shaped, I guess you could say, structural pieces that go across. And so then there's the wind bracing that kind of holds this all together, and they put the membrane over the top. But unlike traditional construction, one of the big challenges that we faced immediately was the weight of the generators, and being able to brace them themselves was probably one of the more serious undertakings we uncovered right away in the project. Spacing of those so that we could get the foam not to be deployed on top of the aircraft, but let's get it down to the floor level. So moving these around, it took a great deal of work with the structural engineer to really make that work. As long as we're looking at the roof here and kind of talking about that, one of the things I'd tell you is that the other piece of this was it's using a membrane. Within NFPA, you'll find that you are to use outside air as the air makeup for the foam generators. Well, using a membrane covered roof, we now were challenged with coming up with a performance based design. We could use the internal air, similar to what you would find in some of the Department of Defense projects. And so we spent a great deal of time, in this case, working with Ansel. We were able to identify some performance data that they had from laboratory tests, and then could document what that system performance would be, how that inside air may change the foam generation that we would experience from the generators by using air that may have been heated. It may include some other contaminants within the air, and so we're forced to modify the volume and understand what that may do to change the amount of foam we were generating, so that we could get a design that would provide what we needed from the 409 aspect, but now using that performance base to use the inside air.
Interesting, very interesting. You touched on a lot of great points there. Yeah, I have some experience in fire protection for hangars, so yeah, I love talking about this stuff. Yes, for those who don't know, those pumps that you were talking about were in parallel, probably. Something that's unique to fire protection for hangars is the flow that's required to protect these facilities is beyond what I've seen in any other type of occupancy. So, having to have two pretty large fire pumps going in parallel. Did I say parallel before?
Yep, you did.
Parallel is something unique to this occupancy, and something I think is super fascinating. Yeah, that's cool about the membrane hanger, and really kind of I wonder, is that a unique case? Usually, do you get to use the inside air makeup for membrane hangers? Or
Uh, it was on the one we did. I don't know if others have come up with a better solution for penetrating that to get the outside air, but just working with the structural team and the membrane manufacturer we had, that was not going to be an option for what we were trying to do.
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, that is a it's they're heavy. You don't realize by looking at them that those ChemGuard 27Ks or whatever you were referencing before. I'm pretty sure those still are the largest ones I'm aware of. Um, but they're heavy, and you need additional structural support and framing for those high expansion foam generators. So
And if any of you could have seen the look on the architect's face, I think all of us have been challenged in the design of a fire pump. Is that often room is not the luxury that we ever get blessed with. So
right,
when we came to them and highlighted, we have two diesel engine pumps, so we have uh, both the foam concentrate tank. We've got our diesel fuel tanks. We've got our two pumps themselves, and then we've got the array of valves and associated piping. Once we started to put together a layout and not cross over the tops of the controllers or violate any other codes, that pump room became quite expansive in a hurry. So it was one of those items where, obviously the initial design, they did not include near the space that we had needed. So we had to further coordinate and develop a situation there where we would have the access and the space needed to make all of that fit and still be something you could maintain in the future.
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I think hangars and fire protection for hangars is one of the few cases where fire protection gets to drive a little bit as far as programming, space, and requirements as far as what we're provided with. You can't just be in a closet somewhere when you need, several hundred square feet to house diesel pumps, tanks, controllers, several controllers, foam concentrate, the valving and piping associated. So yeah, I
It,
definitely know what you're
it
talking
was
about
great.
there.
It was fun for the fire protection engineer to have a seat at the head table for once and help drive the design instead of being forced to react to it. Um,
Instead
you
of
know,
them telling you you're in a closet and deal with it, and you
exactly,
got this much
exactly.
space.
And it did.
Yeah,
It even extended out within the hangar bays themselves. Some of the other challenges we had was we used triple IR detectors, flame detectors, to operate the system, and so developing a layout with some of the other equipment and other parts and pieces so that we could maintain that line of sight for all of the detectors and cover the entire space. When you're essentially 90,000 square feet, I mean, it's a football field by a football field. So, the number of detectors in the location, we had to really drive a lot of that alternate pieces that had to fit within what we were working to achieve. Some of the hose requirements, and working with the AHJ, we couldn't get a hose reel. I think the limitation was 100 feet at the time. And so having them understand what some of the limitations and the capabilities of what that hose system would be able to provide. So we had to work with them to further understand and develop what that was going to look like. Even to, I think anybody that's done some hangar work, where do I put the manual releases and how do I protect them? How do I identify them so staff can find them quickly and protect them so that they're not inadvertently causing a release of the expansion system, as well as in this case, we had abort buttons so that you could hold down that would help to automatically. It was one of the remote resettable deluge valves. So as long as you were able to hold that, you could stop that discharge if you were to encounter that. So there was a lot of parts and pieces that really, for once, it was nice to be as the fire protection guy on the project. To, hey, I get to sit up here and all of you get to help work with. Here's what we need to do. It was fun.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, for those who don't know, those flame detectors are triple infrared flame detectors, and so usually the way they design them is to have overlapping coverage beneath the fuselage and wing of the airplane, so you can't have equipment in front of them, and they usually kind of have a redundancy in that you need two of them activating to initiate a foam discharge. And then, yeah, another really cool piece about on the equipment front is that deluge valve with flow control trim that is the only way that you could have the option to abort the fire suppression discharge. It's a very expensive valve and trim configuration to be able to push down on that diaphragm, abort the, basically the foam and water flowing. So those are some unique equipment components that you wouldn't see outside of this application generally.
Yeah, a couple other things we ran into, Gus. In this case, the local sewer authority did not want us to be able to discharge directly into their sanitary sewer system. So the plumbing engineer and I had to come up with an underground containment tank, and there was a diverter valve then we used. So I believe it was 50,000 gallons in size is the final number we came to, where upon release of the foam system, the diverter valve would then direct any of the effluent from those floor drains and trench drains to be held in the containment tank. So you could get a local company to come out and service that, to pump that out and then take it to a treatment center for appropriate disposal. So it was another challenge as we worked through, and it sent some information to the local sewer authority that we didn't see coming. I look at testing the system. Another challenge when you have an 8-inch valve that opens like that, deluge valve that opens, is that the system pressure drop is so great when you have two pumps in parallel that adjusting the pressure settings so that you only had the primary pump activate was quite a challenge. We did numerous field tests to get that pressure settings just right so that you would have the ability to see that pressure drop without tripping the second pump. At running them in parallel, a concern was if both pumps operated, was there a chance that we would draw so much water that the underground water main could be damaged? So it was another one of those items where you get to the construction phase and you think you've gotten through it all, and then you encounter something during the commissioning work that it now requires a great deal of thought and consideration.
Wow, yeah, those are all great points. The containment is one that I find that usually people have a lot of. It's a topic of concern First of all, the fact that you got to talk with the utility company and verify that they will accept any, um, if at all, amount of this discharge from the effluent from the high expansion foam. But then, yeah, also, working with civil to locate these underground or containment tanks, like you mentioned. And so, yeah, it's a peculiar system as well that we have to be associated with in hangar projects. But I wanted to get into a little bit about. I could talk about hangars all day, and I would love to,
It's a
keep going on
fascinating
that
topic.
subject. Yeah, I would love to keep going on that subject, but I'd feel like I'd be kicking myself if I didn't get a chance to ask you about your work on NFPA technical committees. I think that is something that is really interesting, and not too many times do I get a chance to speak with somebody who has an integral role in a process. Um, to work with these committees. So yeah, I wanted to ask if you would speak on your involvement with the NFPA technical committees.
Sure, sure. It's fascinating to see from being on the committees, where are we headed? The as we have people throughout the industry developing new products and new technologies, and then how do you take something like that and fit it within the codes and standards that we are accustomed to dealing with, while maintaining the ability to have the same type of system, um, the efficiency, the reliability that we've come to expect from a fire protection system. It's been a fantastic journey for me. 20 and 24, the beautiful part is starting way back at the beginning of my career with Ahern and designing systems. These are things that I've had the opportunity to work with for nearly 20 years now. And, working with the committee, it's a process. I think any of you that may have gone on to NFPA's website and you look at the number of hearings that we go through, the number of iterations that each of these get, it was definitely eye opening to me as I took part in this process to just see how thoroughly reviewed these items are, and how do we do that? How do we write this language in such a way that it is not geared to any one specific manufacturer or one specific engineer, or how do we make it very understandable without being too restrictive, or to the point where it would be a sole source type of thing. So it's a challenge. I've enjoyed it. Part of it is I like the fact that for me, again, it's another networking opportunity. Many of the individuals that I now get the chance to speak with and interact with are people that I've looked up to throughout our industry for my career, and being able to work with them on a collegial level has been just a fantastic experience, and having them as somebody that I can turn to, call on, and ask questions of. It's been really rewarding. So if anybody gets the opportunity, I would definitely tell them that it's very enjoyable, and it's worth the extra effort and the evenings and the time spent reviewing some of this work. You'll definitely feel that reward.
That's great. That's great exposition on the codes and standards process. It kind of blew me away the first time I heard somebody talk about the detail in which the process is in kind of takes with nitpicking words and bringing up the occurrence of how many times we use this word to describe it, or the literal spelling of this word, and kind of dissecting it down to the letter of the law. It's kind of wild to me.
And to get that consistently across all of the various documents, I was surprised, as you look through just the number of NFPA standards and how much work it takes to just be consistent in the language and the terminology that's used so that the end product of what is available for the codes and standards is something that you can understand and relate to, so the definitions are consistent. It's much there's much more to it than I would have ever guessed until you really dive into it like that and see it firsthand.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I would like to get involved, but I don't know. It seems like I don't know. I don't know if I have time to get involved. I'm sure I do if I wanted to make time, but it seems interesting, and I would want to be involved with. I feel like there's a lot of people applying for some of the I say more interesting, but I guess it just depends on who you are, which one you find interesting. But
And I would tell you, Gus, to anyone listening, get involved. It may not be one of the core standards that maybe you're used to working with, but as a fire protection engineer, we have experience in dealing with so many of these issues that if there's an opportunity, if there's a standard that you are using on a project, and you can get on the committee, begin there. At least give yourself the opportunity so that when you have a chance to get onto a standard, if the technical committee is looking for one that you're involved with, part of the resume that you're going to be providing is I've been part of that NFPA process. I understand the time commitments. I understand how we get from the draft all the way to the next published edition of that standard. So find a way to get involved. Whichever ones that you feel like you're comfortable with, sign up, become part of the process.
yeah, I like that. I appreciate that. And so, Craig, I just wanted to end with I appreciate all the different points you've touched on, but I just wanted to ask you if you had a piece of advice for professionals who are listening to this. You've had some great topics along the way, like networking and getting involved with the codes and standards process, and just kind of how to dive in and really lean into different work that you may not be comfortable with. But yeah, I didn't know if you had any parting words for professionals listening.
Yeah, I seize every opportunity you're given. Many of the career experiences that I've had have been on the fact that I said, "Sure, I'll take it." Be willing to explore things, be comfortable with change and uncertainty. As any of us get through our daily lives, you see that often, as we touched earlier, it's not black and white. It's gray, and use the knowledge that you have to navigate that, communicate with people, document items. It's so critical being able to speak right and present yourself in an efficient manner. So finding ways to get up in front of people to gain the experience. Never turn down something just because it looks difficult, because some of those cases for me has been where I've had some of my biggest growth and where I've really been able to expand my horizons and my own capabilities. So definitely look for those chances you get where it may seem treacherous, it might seem a bit scary, but it really is going to be what's going to push you. There's a quote from the movie The Greatest Showman, and I keep it posted here next to my computer, and is comfort, the enemy of progress. And so I think too often it's easy to get comfortable in our careers and comfortable with a position. So I challenge any of you to step outside that comfort and really push yourself. You'll be amazed at what you can do.
Wow. I can't think of a better way to end the podcast. Craig, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your career and some of the great things that you're doing now. If people want to find out more about you, where would you tell them to go?
Sure. You can look up my LinkedIn profile, Craig Vesely, V as in Victor, Esely. You can also visit my consulting website, that is veselyfire.com. Either of those will get you an opportunity to learn a little bit more about me, and get some contact information. Happy to discuss fire protection and life safety with everybody.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Craig, and we'll have to do this another time. I know we just skimmed the surface on your career and we got the spark notes, but I really enjoyed it. Thanks again, sir.
You bet. Thanks, Gus. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to share the episode with a friend if you enjoyed it. Don't forget that fire protection and life safety is serious business. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are by no means a professional consultation or a codes and standards interpretation. Be sure to contact a licensed professional if you are getting involved with fire protection and or life safety. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.